Starting us off at number 10 is Flight 441. Back in 1954, one of the most esteemed US Navy carriers was scheduled to fly to the beautiful islands of Azores. And at the time, the aircraft was a pretty big deal because it could fly over the Atlantic Ocean in about 8.5 hours, which for the time was record speed. On the morning of October 30th, 42 passengers boarded the flight, all of which were either naval officers or their families. But just 400 miles from the coast, all radio communication with the plane was lost, and it seemed to have vanished from reality. Confused and scared for the 42 missing passengers and plane, a search party went out looking for them, but no sign of wreckage or remains was found between New Jersey and the Azores. The aircraft was equipped with over 100 life vests, as well as life rafts, paper cups, and exposure suits, and had the plane crashed in any way, all of that should have been scattered in the sea. But like I said, nothing that was on board that flight was ever seen again. Next up at number 9 is Flight 19. On December 5th, 1945, a training fleet of 14 Avenger torpedo bombers mysteriously disappeared while flying over the Atlantic Ocean. The Navy planes were being led by the experienced pilot Charles C. Taylor, and the plan was to fly east of Fort Lauderdale for 227 kilometers before heading north for 117, then scooting right back around for 230 kilometers to finish the training lap. But strangely, during the flight, Taylor's compass stopped working, and it's believed he mistook the small Bermuda Islands below for the Florida Keys, resulting in the flight heading over the open sea and away from land. They lost contact with the land and never made it back to the base, and to this day no one knows what happened to the 14 men that were flying those planes. Even stranger is that the Navy sent out search and rescue aircraft to try and find any trace of the missing people and planes. They too mysteriously disappeared and never returned. Coming in at number 8, a trilander. Though it might seem like it from this list, not every strange disappearance happened before most of us were born. In fact, on December 15th, 2008, a trilander was leaving Santiago and heading towards New York with 12 passengers on board. But after a mere 35 minutes in flight, the aircraft completely vanished from the radar, terrifying the operations crew. They tried to make contact with the plane, but sadly they were not able to get through to them, so a massive search was launched by the Coast Guard. Tragically, just as many before it, the plane was never tracked down. Its last known location was 4 miles west of the West Caicos Islands, pretty much smack in the middle of the dreaded Bermuda Triangle. Coming in at number 7, Piper Navajo. On November 3rd, 1978, Captain Irving Rivers was departing from St. Croix with Eastern Caribbean Airways. Rivers was a well-seasoned pilot with many years of experience and was making the solo flight over to St. Thomas to pick up some passengers. The day started out normal. Great even. Temperatures were warm, skies were clear, and it looked like it was just gonna be your average day in the sky. But during the flight, the control tower operator radioed over to Rivers suggesting a slight course correction to avoid a small shower up ahead. Rivers agreed and made the adjustment. Then, a mere 1.6 kilometers from landing the plane in St. Thomas, after already being cleared for landing, the red and green lights on the radar disappeared. The control tower had lost the location of the plane out of nowhere. An emergency search was immediately launched, but nothing was ever found, and no one has ever been able to figure out where the plane or Captain Rivers went. Coming in at number 6, Star Tiger. On the morning of January 28, 1948, crew and passengers boarded the Star Tiger in Lisbon, only to be forced to evacuate the plane after Captain McMillan felt the engine needed some attention. After a 2.5-hour wait, they were on their way in the sky, but the weather was so bad that their 75-minute stop in Santa Maria turned into an overnight layover to wait until things cleared up. So on the 29th, the 16 passengers boarded a third time onto the plane, headed for Bermuda, and despite strong winds, it seemed as though it was off to a good start. The captain decided to fly low to try and avoid the high winds, and another plane that had taken off an hour prior had agreed to radio communicate weather information with McMillan. Soon after takeoff, they were lashed with heavy rain and strong winds, but still he continued on. After 10 hours in the air, he was finally starting to approach Bermuda, and the trip was almost done. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, all communication was lost with Star Tiger, and the aircraft, along with all the passengers and crew aboard, disappeared without a trace. While skeptics of the phenomenon think it could have had something to do with the engine issues experienced earlier or bad weather, the timing of Star Tiger's disappearance was all too coincidental and definitely added suspicion to the legend. Coming in at number 5, Flight 201. On March 31st, 1984, a Cessna plane departed Fort Lauderdale towards Bimini Island in the Bahamas, but mysteriously, it never arrived at its destination. All the passengers on board were employees of the company, which usually would be the best case scenario should any kind of emergency happen, but despite the experienced crew, something went very wrong and there was no fixing it. About midway to the destination, the plane started getting slow, like strangely slow, but no radio signals were made indicating any kind of distress. Then, as if out of a movie, the plane fell from the sky and crashed into the ocean below, vanishing from the radar. A woman even reported being a witness to the plunging plane about a mile offshore, but no wreckage from the crash was ever found. It remains one of the greater mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle, as especially considering there was an eyewitness to the crash, why was no one ever able to find any evidence of the disaster? Coming in at number 4, Star Ariel. Just a year after the Star Tiger was lost forever, another Tudor IV aircraft was set to fly from Bermuda to Jamaica. On the morning of January 17th, 1949, another plane was actually scheduled to fly the passengers, but after experiencing an engine failure, it was out of commission, and so the passengers were moved over to the Star Ariel. Now, I'm not saying that the other plane's engine failure was a sign that people shouldn't be flying that day, but I'm also not saying that. Anyway, the 7 crew members and 13 passengers promptly boarded the Jamaica-destined plane and they were off. The flight started off smoothly, it was beautiful weather, and so the captain went up to a high altitude to take advantage of it. About an hour into the flight, he contacted the destination airport, keeping them updated with his ETA and whatnot. Then after another hour, he let them know he was changing his frequency, and that was the last anyone heard from the captain. The plane never arrived in Jamaica, and no one on the plane was ever seen or heard from again. A search party deployed fairly quickly after their disappearance, but not a shred of wreckage was found. It was like they vanished out of thin air. Coming in at number 3, a fishing trip. In July of 2015, 2 teenage friends, Austin Stephanos and Perry Cohen, often went out fishing together. The boat they used belonged to Austin's family, and his dad and grandfather were very confident in his abilities to maneuver it, saying he had driven it many times. Still, the boys usually stayed fairly close to the coast. One night, however, they decided to take a trip over to the Bahamas together. So the next morning, they made their way over to the marina. Austin texted his parents at 11:25 a.m. and then the pair boarded the 19-foot family boat and set sail on their fishing trip to the Bahamas. Shortly after their departure, a bad storm started to appear and the National Weather Service announced an official warning, but it was too late for the boys at sea. Now, no one knows exactly what happened to them, but somewhere in the Atlantic, the two disappeared forever. The boat they had been driving was later found with a few items on board, but sadly the boys were never seen again. Coming in at number 2, the USS Cyclops. In January of 1918, the US Navy set out its largest ship to sail from Virginia to Brazil, then back to Baltimore through the Bermuda region. The ship was 540 feet long by 65 feet wide and was carrying 10,800 tons of manganese ore with about 309 crew members on board. So, as you can imagine, it wasn't hard to miss. The ship arrived in Rio de Janeiro, where she stayed for 2 weeks while the cargo was loaded and unloaded. Then on the morning of February 15th, the crew made their way to Bahia, Brazil, which was their only scheduled stop on their way back to the States. 2 days later, the ship set sail for Baltimore and was expected to arrive on March 13th. But on March 3rd, the ship made an odd and unplanned stop in Barbados and was never seen or heard from again. No remains of the ship or crew members were ever found, and the captain never sent a distress signal at any time during the disappearance. While some speculate that the manganese ore could have exploded or that even a giant octopus dragged them down, most believe it was lost to the unexplainable phenomenon of the Bermuda Triangle. And last up today is the witchcraft. Back in December of 1967, Captain Dan Burrack and his friend Patrick Horgan departed Miami in their cabin cruiser named Witchcraft. Now, maybe it's just me, but that does feel like an all too on-the-nose coincidence. Anyways, the pair were traveling on a 23-foot luxury yacht with the innocent intention of watching Miami's Christmas light show from a nice view at sea. But after reaching just 1 mile from the shore, the Coast Guard received a call from the captain of the boat stating that his ship had hit something. The captain assured the Coast Guard it was nothing serious and that there was no substantial damage, but still the Coast Guard wanted to come out and see for himself. The guard immediately left his station and in just 19 minutes arrived at the area where the Witchcraft was, or rather should have been. The area indicating the ship's location was completely deserted, with no signs of any ship having been stranded or even present there previously. Over the next few days, officials searched hundreds of square miles through the ocean to track down the lost ship, but they were never able to track it or the 2 men aboard.
Starting off this countdown, we have Flight 19. On December 5th of 1945, 5 Navy Avenger torpedo bombers, aka Flight 19, headed out from the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The 27 men involved were scheduled to do a 3-hour exercise in the area that is now considered the Bermuda Triangle. On this day, all men and their planes disappeared into thin air. No trace of them has ever been found. Not only that, but 13 crew members were set out to look for the missing crew and planes, but those men too never returned. According to the Navy's report of the accident, the disappearance was due to causes of reasons unknown. Moving on to number 9, we have the wormhole. There's a legend out there that the Bermuda Triangle is home to a wormhole that can be used for time travel. This legend began when a man was flying above the Bermuda Triangle when he suddenly got trapped in a storm. His plane went out of control and he passed out. When he woke up, he was flying 2,000 miles from the triangle, but it said that he only traveled for half an hour. It's impossible for a chartered plane, unless he was traveling at thousands of miles per hour, to make that. So it's believed that he was teleported in time. Moving on, at number 8, we have the witchcraft. Now, I'm not saying that there's witchcraft involved in the Bermuda Triangle, but I mean, maybe there is, okay? But no, that is the name of a luxury cabin cruiser that set sail from Miami in December of 1967. On board was the captain and his friend. They wanted to go out just far enough to see the Christmas lights. But at 9 p.m. that night, the captain radioed the Coast Guard saying that he had hit something. Now, he said that the damage wasn't bad, but he would need a tow back in. The Coast Guard took off immediately to their location, and it only took him 20 minutes to get there. But by the time that they arrived, the ship was gone. To this day, no wreckage has been found. The weirdest part is that the boat had special flotation devices built in to make it unsinkable. Even if the boat flooded, a part of the hull would still float. But nothing was visible to the Coast Guard. There was no wreckage. The men disappeared without a trace. In our 7th spot, we have Star Ariel. The Star Ariel aircraft left Bermuda on January 17th of 1949, with 7 crew members and 13 passengers on board. They were all headed to Jamaica, however, they never made it. That morning, the captain reported that the flight was going smoothly. However, that was followed with a very cryptic message. In the message, he reported that he was changing his frequency. That was the last time he was ever heard from again. A search party was deployed to look for the aircraft after it failed to arrive to Jamaica, but nothing was found, not even a sign of debris or wreckage. How creepy. In our 6th spot today, we have the Ellen Austin. On December 5th of 1880, a ship known as the Ellen Austin left for New York from London when it came across a ship floating by itself. There were no signs of a captain or crew on the ship, so some of the crew decided to hop on board to loot it. However, while on board, they found that the ship was lifeless. There was no signs of it being ransacked or attacked, but they decided to tow it along with them. However, along the way, they encountered a terrible storm, and the ship, along with the crew on board, disappeared while the Ellen Austen made it back to England. Here's the creepy part. A day later, they found the ship. However, all the crew on board vanished. There was no trace of them. Other accounts of the story say that when the boat was found, a completely different crew was on board. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the electronic fog. Some people believe that one of the reasons why the Bermuda Triangle is so dangerous is because it has something known as electronic fog. According to a man named Rob McGregor, he is a survivor of this electronic fog. On December 4th of 1970, he was flying over the triangle when he was met by this weird tunnel-shaped vortex. He entered it, and apparently the plane's wings sounded like they were scraping along metal. On top of that, all of the electronic and magnetic navigational instruments malfunctioned. When he looked up, all he saw was this dull gray fog, and there were strange clouds forming behind his plane. They were only in the cloud for a couple of minutes, but when they got out of it, they realized that they had actually traveled for 40 minutes. When they got out of the fog, they were over Miami Beach, a flight that should have taken 75 minutes, but they did it in half the time. Coming in at number 4, we have Flight 201. On March 31st, 1984, Flight 201 left Fort Lauderdale, Florida, headed to the Bahamas. While on the way, about midway to the destination, the plane slowed down its airspeed, but no radio signals were made from the plane to indicate distress. Then all of a sudden, the plane just dropped from the air right into the water. A woman on a nearby island saw this plane plunge into the sea, but no wreckage has ever been found. It's like the Bermuda Triangle just swallows everything whole. In our 3rd spot today, we have Joshua Slocum. In 1895, Joshua was the first man to sail alone around the world. He was a well-known seaman, an expert sailor, navigator, and adventurer. So it was quite weird when he disappeared without a trace. He wasn't a novice, he could tackle tricky waters. Joshua was last heard from in 1909. In July of 1910, his wife informed the newspapers that she believed that he was lost at sea. By 1924, he was declared legally dead. To this day, it's believed that he fell victim to the Bermuda Triangle. Coming in at number 2, we have Sylvia L. Osa. This was the name of a Panamanian cargo ship that would regularly travel the waters of the Bermuda Triangle. That was until 1976. The ship was out sailing the Bermuda Triangle when it disappeared without a trace. The 590-foot ship, along with the 37 passengers, were gone in a blink of an eye. Like most instances on today's list, there was no wreckage left behind, so we really don't know what happened to them. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Lost Souls. Apparently several years ago, when ships were traveling along the triangle, slaves and other passengers were tossed overboard and just left to drown. For example, in the 18th century, one captain defrauded an insurance company by tossing some of his crew members off the boat and then would cash in on a claim for them. From there, it's said that these souls are still present and out to get revenge on those attempting to pass. Other people that have passed the area have claimed to see silhouettes of individuals floating on the water in the distance. Then they just suddenly disappear. They believe that these souls want you to suffer the same fate that they did. So those flying will crash into the waters and drown, and those sailing will be tipped over and drowned.
Starting us off at number 10 is true north. Very few places on Earth will ever actually point to true north. What is true north? True north is the direction that points exactly towards the geographic North Pole. Being that there are next to no markers and obviously no landmarks in the middle of the ocean, when GPS and other high-tech systems go awry, ships and other craft are forced to use their compasses as a way to stay on track. Compasses operate usually by pointing towards magnetic north, as the compass aligns with Earth's magnetic field. Magnetic north can shift depending on the change in the Earth's magnetic core, which operators and sailors are prepared for, thus creating a huge issue when operators and sailors traveling through the mysterious triangle discover that their compass is no longer working properly, because it's pointing to true north instead of magnetic north. I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've ever had to use a compass, and I think no matter what my compass reads, I would still be lost at sea. So Bermuda doesn't sound like the greatest vacay spot, but let's continue to see what's in store before we make up our mind. At number 9, we have the deepest spot on Earth. So we always talk about how much we want to keep exploring space and we want to get to know our own universe, but you know what's really funny to me? We still have barely scraped the surface, or under the surface, for exploring our own ocean. One of those places being the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is home to one of the deepest spots on Earth. Underneath the surface, the topography of the seafloor goes from a gentle sloping continental shelf to a drop of a few hundred feet to another drop of a few who knows how many thousand feet. Many disappearances that have been reported in the Bermuda Triangle could have their answers laying somewhere at the bottom of these deep trenches. But until we actually start exploring our oceans just as much as we explore space, just like whatever lays at the bottom, we will be left in the dark. At our number 8 spot, we have methane gas. This gas is colorless, odorless, highly flammable, and one of the main components in natural gas which we all use to generate electricity and heat our homes all around the world. But guess what? It's also in the Bermuda Triangle. Due to decomposing sea organisms, scientists have discovered large concentrations of methane gas trapped in the ocean floor. Methane accumulates as concentrated methane ice, and if and when a pocket ruptures, the gas rockets upwards towards the surface without any warning or notice to those sailing above. If a ship were to be in the area of the blowout, it could possibly sink because the water would become much less dense and sediment could quickly cover it as the wreck lands on the sea floor. As of right now, there is no proof that this is the reason for any of the missing ships that have been reported in the Bermuda Triangle, but then again, how would we ever know? At our number 7 spot, we have Rogue Waves. Now does that not sound like a great band name or what? Due to the location of the Bermuda Triangle in the Atlantic Ocean, storms can come from all directions. They can come from Mexico, from the equator, or the east side of the Atlantic. These storms of course make major waves reaching up to 30 feet or 10 meters tall, but what happens when they all come together at the exact same moment? These rogue waves can reach up to sizes of 100 feet or 30 meters tall. Engineers at the University of Southampton built models of different sized ships and simulated their own rogue waves in a wave tank for the small scale ships. What happened? These engineers discovered that these ships could indeed sink. The bigger the ship, the easier it was to sink because big ships are designed to be supported in the front by the top of a wave while the back is supported by another. But if hit by a rogue wave, those big ships, guess what? They snap in two. The small ones can sometimes survive if they hit the wave bow on, but most times will just get swallowed up completely. Rogue waves, hopefully not coming to an ocean near you. At our number 6 spot, we have electronic fog. So far, out of the many distress calls claiming to come from an electronic fog, these stories and events have been labeled as supernatural and not taken seriously. But there are reports from actual pilots who have flown through these strange phenomena, and it's wild. Veteran pilot Bruce Gurnon reports that when he was flying with his father in his classic Bonanza plane back in 1970, about 3 miles off Andros Island, an elliptical shaped cloud began forming in front of them. Before the father and son could escape the path of this mysterious cloud, they were engulfed and had a tunnel form all the way around them. And while in the cloud flying at 10,000 feet, they reported seeing lines in the tunnel spiraling counterclockwise while propelling them forward. They then started feeling the effects of zero gravity and all of their navigational systems started to fail. Fortunately, this electronic spiraling fog tunnel dissipated and they found themselves right over Miami Beach and were once again able to pick up radar. The next strange thing? They traveled 100 miles in 30 minutes less time than usual. Similar stories to Gurnon's have been reported as well, but with no real answers to how or why. Some suspect it could be something related to the Hutchison effect, but as of right now the electronic fog is still a mystery. Coming in at our number 5 midway spot is the once infamous mythical creature proven to be real, the giant squid. Aside from the many strange events and things found in the Bermuda Triangle, some have reported seeing a giant octopus, or octopi if there are more than one. I wonder. Now, as of right now, there is no such thing as these creatures, but giant squid are indeed a real animal, and 2 Japanese scientists believe they caught one on camera. In 2005, 2 Japanese scientists spotted a giant squid aggressively taking baited lines. Normally, these creatures are not known to be in this area of ocean, but the footage says differently. These giant squid can reach up to 150 feet. Seeing the aggressive nature of this creature as well as the size, it is no wonder some believe that they could be responsible for some of the disappearing ships. Speaking of, coming in our top 4 spot, we have ships that have gone missing. As I said earlier, there are more than 50 ships that are reported to have gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle over the years. One of the most notorious ones being the USS Cyclops. One of the Navy's largest fuel ships went missing back in March 1918. This ship was carrying 10,800 tons of manganese ore with 309 crew members on board. Only one message was received from the ship during its voyage from Brazil to Baltimore, and it reported no trouble whatsoever while it was out on the sea. But then, it sailed through the Bermuda Triangle. The ship never made it to its destination and was never found. Not only was the ship never found, but also no debris or crew members either. There was no distress call received anywhere. One of the largest ships in the Navy and everything on board and everyone on board gone missing in a flash with no explanation? That's scary. Starting us off at our number 3 spot is planes gone missing. Over 20 aircraft just like ships have gone missing over the years, and some of these reports are quite recent too. One of the latest being just last year in May when a small twin-engine plane mysteriously went missing. Same thing as the USS Cyclops, those aboard started their flight with no complications whatsoever, and there were no distress calls reported or anything out of the ordinary. Once again, no wreckage, crew, or any signs of any explanation can be found. But maybe our next one on the list will help. At our number 2 spot, we have UFO sightings. If you have been keeping up to date with any of the alien news lately, you will know that there have been more than a couple of sightings all over North America in the last few years. One of them taking place over the Bermuda Triangle, April 28, 2020, reported by not just anyone, but the United States Air Force. Many of the United States Air Force members have come out quite recently with more and more sightings, with some of them dating all the way back to the 1970s, right over top of the Bermuda Triangle. I hear more and more alien information every day, and I am loving it. If I ever have a major reason to go to Bermuda, it's to see some aliens. Come on, who's coming with me? Finally, coming in at our number 1 spot is something we're going to have to grab our proton packs for, because our final and weirdest thing found in Bermuda is ghost ships. Back in 1881, the infamous Ellen Austin ship experienced a ghost ship in an area of the Bermuda Triangle before things went awfully awry. The crew of the Ellen Austin discovered the ship fully stocked but with no crew on board or anywhere to be seen. Seeing an opportunity for a free ship with supplies, part of the Ellen Austin crew took over the ship and prepared to sail back with the ships side by side. Just then, an unexpected storm came out of nowhere and totally engulfed the 2 ships. After the storm was over the next day, both ships came out of the Terror, but no crew was anywhere to be seen on the picked up ghost ship. Just then, crew members and captain of the Ellen Austin came aboard once again and then got swallowed up by a mysterious fog. And once the fog cleared, the ghost ship completely vanished along with everything and everyone. I hate to say it, but I guess that's karma, and she's always gonna come for you.
To show off. Maybe there's a girl watching and you want to impress her, or maybe you never resolved that deep regret of not pushing yourself harder in high school football. But sometimes you need to remember that you're at work and it's not the time to try to show off to people and show them how cool you think you are. Well, back in 2012, the captain of the Costa Concordia thought he would show everyone on the boat of an Italian cruise ship how good of a captain he was by performing a sail-by. Just so you know, this is nothing like a drive-by. Everything on boats is nicer. Like drinking and driving, bad. Drinking and boating, that's the only way you can get people on a boat. A sail-by is when you swoop in close to a landmass to take a close look. What ended up happening is the captain misjudged how close he could get and crashed into it. After this, he tried to be a hero and help everyone on the ship. Just kidding, he abandoned ship. He treated crashing into the island like hiding pieces of that broken vase when you were playing kickball inside and your mom got mad at you. He later was arrested for manslaughter and abandoning ship. Bummer. Number 9. The MS Estonia. Now here's another case of people just not really doing their job right. The MS Estonia was a smaller transport ship, used sometimes as a cruise ship but mostly as a ferry. One day it was making a pretty standard trip from Estonia to Sweden, and there was 989 people on board the boat at this time. So far so good, but the cargo on the boat hadn't been placed evenly on the boat, so the weight distribution was off. While making the cross, the MS Estonia got hit with a major storm and the ship leaned over to one side and began to flood. It was a devastating loss. Almost every person on board didn't make it. Of the 989 people who went out, only 139 were picked up by the Coast Guard. If they had just put a little more effort into their job, like move a couple boxes to the other side of the boat, this might have not been a problem. Also, I have no idea how boats work, so maybe it was a little more complicated than that. You probably shouldn't listen to me. Number 8. The SS Edmund Fitzgerald. Super fun name. The year is 1975. A big tanker is trying to cross Lake Superior. This seems like it should have been the most chill voyage ever. You're crossing a lake, you're on a big boat. It sounds like the kind of job you can do while eating a sandwich in one hand and being very hungover. But it's on this list, so you already know something went wrong. I'm gonna tell you the truth. I have no idea how this big guy sunk. There was no distress signal sent out. Maybe it was ghost pirates, or it could have been the hurricane winds and the 35-foot swells that were happening on the lake that day. Something weird about this shipwreck is Gordon Lightfoot made a song about it. Who's Gordon Lightfoot? I have no idea. Maybe he would be more famous if he wasn't writing songs about sunken ships. How about next time you write a song about drugs, sex, and violence so I have something to listen to while I'm meditating? Number 7. Carnival Triumph. So this ship didn't sink, but it did get wrecked. And I had to include it on the list because it's an amazing story. So back in 2013, this cruise ship was out in the Gulf of Mexico. People were eating, drinking, partying, everyone's diet was horrible. IBS was running smoke all over this ship. It was truly a great time. Then a fire broke out in one of the engine rooms. The fire was quickly put out by the safety systems on the ship, but it damaged the ship so everything lost power. It caused the motors to stop working and sewage to back up into the passenger areas. All those margarita fueled diarrhea squirts were all over everyone, overflowing out of the toilets, and it was coming back to haunt them. Poop was everywhere. It was also super hot. A bunch of stinky turds baking in the sun. They were stuck out there for 4 days. 4 days of poop fumes dancing in their little nose holes. I guess you could say they had a crap time. Number 6, the MV Lajula. Guys, we have rules for a reason. Don't run with scissors, you're gonna fall and cut yourself. Chew your food so you don't choke like a dog inhaling a bird. And when there's a capacity limit on something, maybe you should listen. The MV Lajula was making a trip from Senegal to Dakar back in 2002, and this bad boy was 3 times over its capacity limit. You know what would happen if I got pulled over and blew into a breathalyzer 3 times over the legal limit? Well, I bet I would have had a really good night and like jail or something, I don't know. Well, the people in charge of running this boat obviously didn't care about the rules or the poor weather conditions that they were running into. They hit a storm and the ship flipped in no time. And because the weather was so bad, it took a while for rescue workers to come grab them and almost no one was recovered. Yeah, huge bummer. Number 5, the MTS Oceanos. If you ever go on a cruise ship, don't cheap out. Also, if you run a cruise ship, please take care of it. The MTS Oceanos was a case of neglect on several levels. First, the cruise ship was run down. This thing was littered with loose hull plates, a hole in the bulk, and some of the ship had been stripped for spare parts. This is like taking a cruise run by your buddy Kev with a 1999 Corolla and that has 1,000 water bottles in it and a garbage bag window. Don't worry man, you'll get used to the smell. On its final voyage, an explosion happened in the engine room. This is where the second level of neglect comes in. The crew couldn't fix it, so they just dipped. They didn't sound any alarms, they didn't tell passengers, they were just like, sucks to suck, and took off. After the people were left to fend for themselves, it was an entertainer on board of the boat that sent out the distress call to save everyone. I don't know who this guy is, but he's got some major big dick energy. He saved a cruise ship full of people after all hope was lost. Dude, please be my dad. Number 4, MV Dona Paz. This is a situation of bad thing after bad thing after another bad thing. The MV Dona Paz was a ferry going through some transport waters in the Philippines. It was filled to the brim with passengers. This was a night voyage, so visibility was really poor. So poor that they didn't see the oil tanker coming right at them that they collided with. The MT Vector oil tanker crashed right into the Dona. This was a brutal crash, injuring many of the people on board of both ships. The oil inside the MT Vector caused a fire, and there were now burning ships on both ends, and oil spread into the water and literally burning oil on top of the water. People tried to save themselves by jumping into the water, but between the two ships, only 26 people survived. It was bad. Number 3, the USS Arizona. On December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy. When you listen to the old recording of that broadcast, it sounds like Palpatine. I wonder if when the Americans made the decision to join the war, someone in the back was like, do it. Do it, America. The sinking of the USS Arizona is of course one of the most famous of all time. It was an attack from the Japanese on the Americans, which brought the Americans into World War II. It was a major tragedy, and only 1/3 of the ship's crew ended up making it out alive. There's a memorial site at the sunken site to remember what happened that day. I don't know much about history, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it was a bad move to attack Pearl Harbor. It eventually led to the dropping of 2 atomic bombs, the most powerful bombs on the planet at that time. You could have said that those bombs had unlimited power. Number 2, the Titanic. What can I tell you about this boat that you don't already know? Leonardo DiCaprio fell in love on it, he banged some chick in a car, and then he died of hypothermia. The end. I just saved you 7 hours or however long that movie is. Trust me, you don't want to waste your time watching that movie. An extended cut of Avengers Endgame just got announced, and it's way more worth it. Well, for those of you that don't know, the Titanic was supposed to be a marvel of technology and thought to be completely unsinkable. They were so confident in the boat's ability that there wasn't enough lifeboats and there was no safety briefing given out to the passengers beforehand. The ship then smashed into an iceberg and some dude fell into a propeller and then a bunch of rich people froze to death. The end. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but they built a second Titanic that's going on the same route as the original boat. At least this time when it sinks, I get to watch the whole thing happen on Instagram Live. Number 1, Wilhelm Gustloff. The sinking of the Wilhelm Gustloff was a major tragedy. It was the most lives lost in the sinking of a boat ever. Over 9,000 people died. It was back in 1945 when this boat was making its trip across Baltic waters. And I want everyone to understand that everyone on this boat was a civilian. There was no weapons, the ship wasn't smuggling anything, there was no secrets to be had on this boat. It was about halfway through its voyage when the Wilhelm Gustloff was attacked by Soviet military. The Soviet battleship shot 3 torpedoes at the vessel, causing it to sink immediately. People were thrown from the ship just based on the force of the impact, but it wasn't the weapons that would be these people's fate, but the negative temperatures. Many people on board died from the freezing cold waters.
Number 10. It is said that the DC-3 is one of the most reliable aircrafts to have ever been designed and built. You will see a lot of these airplanes flying in Florida, the Caribbean, and the Bahamas because its main job is for island hopping. But on December 20th, 1948, a DC-3 aircraft took off from San Juan Airport and was headed to Miami. It was only 15 miles from the south of Florida, but the plane was never seen or heard from again. It disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle with 28 passengers and 3 crew members on board. This was the first time that a DC-3 aircraft disappeared, but many others have disappeared since, and they all went missing just 50 miles from the Florida Keys. And you know what? I wouldn't call that a coincidence. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I'll be booking a flight that even has the smallest chance of flying over the Bermuda Triangle. Every time I book a flight, I'm gonna pick up the phone and be like, yo, do you fly over the Bermuda? And if they say yes, I'm gonna be like, bam, hang it up, flight is canceled. I mean, it's 2019, people. Can't we come up with an alternate flight path? Clearly something is going on. Obviously, the Bermuda Triangle is one of life's greatest mysteries, and I don't think we should be going anywhere near it. You know what? Unless your life goal is to disappear without a trace, then go for it. Or if it's on your bucket list to be the one that disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, then go for it. Flight 441 comes flying in on this list at number 9. This aircraft took off with 42 passengers on board as they made their way from the Naz Pax River Naval Station in Legis, and is located in the Azores Islands. I have no idea where that is. I had to search on a map, never heard of it. Well, all contact with the plane was lost when they were about 400 miles from the coast. Flight 441 never arrived at its destination, and it disappeared without a trace. Because of this, the disappearance of Flight 441 was one of the most investigated incidents of all time. They looked into the weather conditions that day and the pilot's abilities. The weather was pretty typical that day. There wasn't any icing, but there was scattered thunderstorms and minor turbulence. The plane was equipped with more than enough flotation devices that should have survived, but again, nothing was ever found. Next up, number 8, we have a very unusual disappearance. Let's travel back to November 3rd, 1978, when a pilot left St. Croix and was headed towards St. Thomas to pick up passengers. This experienced pilot went on this flight by himself, and he has done it, a bunch of times. No big deal. Apparently the visibility was good and temperatures were nice and warm. Some would say that he had the perfect flying conditions, but during the flight the control tower advised him that he was headed for a small shower, so he should alter his route a bit. He made the adjustments needed, and as he was getting close to the St. Thomas airport, the plane was cleared for landing and the control tower saw the red and green lights blinking from the plane, but soon after another plane took off and the controller couldn't see the lights from the original plane. It had disappeared from the radar and an emergency search effort was put into place, but nothing was ever found. And keep in mind that this plane was literally only 1 mile from landing. I mean, this is absolutely horrifying. And where did it go? The disappearance of a small plane takes us to number 7. This is probably one of the most recent cases of a plane disappearance from the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, we're talking about 2017. So in May of that year, this flight was carrying 2 adults and 2 children, and it was scheduled to fly from Puerto Rico to Central Florida, but it never arrived. Miami Air Traffic Control lost radar and radio contact with the airplane just 3 hours into the flight. Rescue crews searched more than 8,200 square miles in over 30 hours, but the plane just seemed to vanish out of thin air. All 4 of them most likely lost their lives, but because of this mysterious disappearance, so many people are coming up with their own theories about what really happened. And you know what, let me know what your guys' theories are. What is going on in the Bermuda Triangle? Let me know in the comment section below. And for all of you guys who are commenting down there, congratulations land. I just want to say thank you guys so much again for all the congratulations. I'm super excited. But let's get back into this. Some of the theories suggest that, aliens are controlling the Bermuda Triangle and they cause ships and planes to crash. While others believe that there's a utopian society located in the Bermuda Triangle and people who find it never want to leave. Star Tiger comes flying in onto this list at number 6. Back on January 30th, 1948, a plane was scheduled to fly from England to Bermuda, but it suddenly vanished without a trace. They were supposed to arrive by 5 a.m. the following day, but the pilot and 31 other people on the plane were never heard from again. In the official report, investigators claimed that the heater on the plane was unreliable and it might have failed en route. So in order to keep the temperatures inside of the cabin warm, the pilot might have chosen to fly at a lower altitude, which would have burned his fuel a lot faster, and if he was flying low, that wouldn't have given him a lot of time to react if he had run into some trouble. It's been 71 years since the plane disappeared, and it still remains a mystery today. Star Ariel comes in onto this list at number 5. This aircraft is very similar to the Star Tiger. It left from Bermuda on January 17, 1949, with 7 crew members and 13 passengers. It was en route to Jamaica, but no one ever predicted that they would become another casualty of the Bermuda Triangle. Apparently the pilot reported that their flight was going smoothly, but shortly afterwards the captain said that he was changing his frequency and he was never heard from again. A search and rescue team was sent out to look for them, but nothing was ever found. After this aircraft disappeared, British South American Airlines stopped the production of the Tudor 4 planes because they clearly have a bad track record of mysteriously disappearing over the Bermuda Triangle. Here's a crazy idea. Instead of stopping the manufacturing of these planes, how about you don't fly into a place that is eating them? I think that would be a safer bet. Just fly around the damn thing. Number 4, we have the mysterious disappearance of the Trislander. A small 3-engine aircraft was set to depart from San Diego to New York on December 15, 2008, and it was carrying 12 passengers on board. But the unthinkable happened. Just 35 minutes after the plane took off, it disappeared from all the radars and no one was able to track its location. The US Coast Guard initiated a massive search and rescue mission, but the plane was never found. There wasn't even a trace on the plane or even a small piece of a wreckage. Its last known location was 4 miles west of West Caicos Island. But sadly, we will never know what happened to those 12 people on board, and their disappearance will remain a mystery forever. Maybe aliens had something to do with it. Maybe everyone in the Bermuda Triangle, all the people were taken into Area 51. So maybe on September 20th, we might find all these missing people. Moving on to number 3, C-54 Skymaster. The C-54 took off from Bermuda on July 3rd, 1947, and it was intercepted by a massive thunderstorm. A lot of investigators and researchers blame the thunderstorm for the plane's disappearances, but there is a lot more to the story. The real question is, why did this plane head straight for the eye of the storm, when it could have easily avoided it? The C-54 was a military aircraft that was capable of carrying 85 passengers. On the day of the flight, there were 5 crew members and a very skilled pilot. So after it took off from Bermuda, the plane started to go off course, but the pilot and the navigator on board weren't aware of this. As a result, it was headed straight for the storm. It headed in this direction for a long time, until the ground radio operator heard a chilling SOS distress call, but for some reason they ignored it. Some debris was found, but they quickly blamed the storm for crashing the plane. I don't know, it kind of sounds a little bit fishy to me. I mean, what's really going on here? Is there a massive cover-up? But you know what, at the end of the day, we're probably never gonna find out. Is the government behind the Bermuda Triangle? There's a lot of theories behind it all. Flight 201 makes an appearance, or a disappearance, in at number 2. The aircraft left Fort Lauderdale on March 31st, 1984, and it was supposed to land on Bimini Island in the Bahamas, but it never made it. Despite the heavily experienced crew and pilot, something terrible went wrong. Halfway into the flight, the plane slowed down significantly, but no radio signals were sent and no distress calls were ever made. Suddenly the plane crashed into the water and it completely vanished off the radar. This seems to be the trend with all of them, but interestingly enough, a woman on Bimini Island reported seeing a plane crash into the water about a mile from the shore, but no wreckage was ever found. How is that even possible? There wasn't even the smallest trace of the plane left behind. I mean, is this real life right now? That just gives me the creeps. And finally, topping our list at number 1, we have the disappearance of Flight 19. On December 5th of 1945, 5 US Navy bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale for a routine training exercise, but they had no idea that that would be their last training exercise ever. They didn't make it back alive. The first leg of the exercise went according to plan, but shortly afterwards, something strange started to happen. The only experienced pilot on the plane, he radioed back to the base saying that both of his compasses aren't working, and he was trying to find Fort Lauderdale. He was sure that he was in the Florida Keys, but he didn't know how far down he was. I mean, take a look at this picture. The yellow part is the flight path that they should have taken, the purple path is where the pilot thought he was, and the red shows you where they actually flew. They are nowhere near each other. They believe that the pilot became extremely disoriented, and one of the trainees said, if we just fly west, we should get home. As it turns out, he was right. But because the experienced pilot was stubborn, they became another victim of the infamous Bermuda Triangle. Oh, and the rescue plane that went to go find them, it also disappeared just 20 minutes after takeoff.
Starting our list off at number 10, Roman shipwreck. Right off the coast of Palermo, Sicily, archaeologists have discovered not only an ancient Roman shipwreck, but jars mainly used for transporting wine and olive oil. We found a long-lost grocery run, it seems. The 2nd century vessel sits in the Mediterranean Sea at around 302 feet deep. Now, it's a shock that this thing was ever found. It's not an extremely large vessel, and again, it's quite old. Wine trade was the bread and butter of the Roman Republic, specifically the wine known as Maritime, which was Julius Caesar's favorite. He loved that one. That was an excellent one. So this discovery really is a 2-for-1, all just lying at the bottom of the sea. Number 9, Lake Ontario. Back in July 2011, a Canadian schooner believed to be around 160 years old was found off the shores of Lake Ontario. So we ask, what went wrong? Did it hit something? Was it abandoned? What happened here? Well, when it was found, the ship was carrying around 480 tons of coal. Now, normally that's manageable, but this fateful voyage was caused by a leak that developed on both sides of the ship. That plus the coal equals bad news. The water was coming in too quick, and with the help of the 480 tons of coal, it was unstoppable. The original search for this ship began in 2009, but it took 2 years to find. Number 8, Norfolk Royal Shipwreck. Okay, so this initial discovery happened back in 2007, but it was a secret until quite recently. On May 6th in 1682, a ship called the Gloucester got stuck on a sandbank off the coast of Norfolk. Then an hour later, she sank, sadly. Now, one of these passengers was the future King James II of England. He escaped at a small small boat, a quick decision that changed the course of history nonetheless. But two diving brothers found the ship back in 2007, so now history has literally resurfaced. And now we can talk about it. Only months ago it was announced officially that this was that lost ship. Maritime expert Claire Jowett calls this recent discovery the single most significant historic maritime discovery since the raising of the Mary Rose, which was King Henry VIII's favorite warship back in 1982. Number 7. The MV Joyita. The case of the MV Joyita began in 1955, and when we think of shipwrecks from the 2nd century, that's, quite recent in comparison. The MV Joyita, this case is baffling, and dare I say, it's a little paranormal. A lot of unanswered questions out there. November 10th, 1955, Captain Gerald Douglas was sailing his merchant ship from Suva, Fiji to Funatuti, which was the capital of Tavula in the South Pacific Ocean. Now that's when he noticed the MV Joyita. It was tipped over, sitting there, not fully sank, but the port side rails were dipping in and out of the water. A search and rescue team went out for 6 days straight to find any survivors. From the 6th to the 12th, they searched, and after searching for hundreds of miles in the Pacific, they found nothing. They found no survivors, no clues, nothing. There's a book that tries to solve the mystery called The Mary Celeste of the South Pacific, but what do you think? If you have any theories on the MV Joyita yourself, sound off below. Number 6. The Great Lakes Griffin. Back in 2018 in Lake Michigan, again, another Canadian discovery, diver Steve Liebert found what he believed was the holy grail of Great Lake shipwrecks. The Griffin sank back in 1679. Divers have been searching for this exact ship for years and years. Now, as a kid, Steve Liebert was talking about the shipwreck when his history teacher stopped and says, "Oh, who knows, maybe one of you will find that Griffin." Imagine that. Imagine your grade 8 teacher telling you that somebody will find a ship and that somebody was actually you. Yeah, at 67 years old, Steve Liebert found the wreck. It was 2018, but his research began 40 years prior, so it was a long time coming. Liebert began diving in 1981. It took a long time to track down this long lost ship, but he did it somehow. This is like National Treasure 3. Let's do this instead. If you're in any Great Lakes, again, keep your eyes open for 50-foot long ships from the late 1600s. Those might be lurking below your feet. Those and sunfish. They're all down there waiting for you. Number 5. The deepest shipwreck. Who knows how many shipwrecks lay in our oceans, right? Considering how many of them have yet to be found, and the ocean's way too big. It's so big, so unfathomably big. The USS Johnston, led by Captain Ernest Evans, was a US Navy destroyer which sank during the Battle of Leyte in 1944 after a standoff with a large fleet of Japanese warships. The destroyed ship laid at the bottom of the ocean around 20,000 feet deep, just hiding in pure darkness until it was discovered in the Philippine Sea in 2019, only a few years ago. Diving crews had been unable to reach it for an up-close look, of course, because it was so deep. And to put an idea of how far down this thing was, well, it was 60% deeper than the Titanic. So as fascinating as it is to find something, now it's still a challenge getting down there to actually see it. I can't even touch the bottom of an in-ground pool without my ears exploding, so I can't even imagine. That's so terrifying. Number 4, HMS Victory. This is one of the oldest wrecks that we have on this list today, and it took place on October 5th, 1744. It's a long time ago. The HMS Victory was a 100-weapon Royal Navy vessel, and on October 3rd, just a couple days before the wreck, the ship was in a fleet reaching the English Channel. A storm ended up scattering said fleet all apart from each other on October 4th, and the ships within the Victory lost sight of her. What happened to the HMS Victory remained a mystery for over 260 years. It wasn't until 2009 that the ship's fate was finally realized. Just 50 miles off the coast of England, near Plymouth, the US company Odyssey Marine Exploration, they ended up finding the wreckage, and when found, the ship's cannons were all still in pristine condition, with even their royal crests still visible underwater, despite, being under there for nearly 3 centuries, hiding in the depths. This was also the first time that any trace of the 1,150 sailors that were on the ship was found, right? This whole time it's been a mystery where they went, what happened to them, all that. This answers a handful of those dark questions. This ship is also a reminder of how the cannons were once made. They were made fully of bronze. Number 3, MV Donna Paz. This maritime disaster took place on December 20th, 1987, when this passenger ferry collided with the oil tanker, the MT Vector. Yeah, it was horrible. The collision took place in the Tabla Strait, which is about 180 kilometers south of Manila. This ship was carrying more than 4,000 people, which was actually double its capacity at the time of the collision. There were no senior officers on the bridge of the ship as well on the Vector, and there was no lookout. And it's thought that both ships lacked a functioning radio, so it's quite possibly the worst conditions imaginable. The weather and waters were both quite calm when the collision actually happened, and despite the clear visibility, neither ship gave an indication that it noticed the other one. So when the collision actually occurred, the 8,800 barrels of oil and gasoline on the Vector quickly ignited and engulfed both ships in flames. Only 26 people survived out of the, again, over 4,000 souls on board that day. Number 2, MV Lijula. This was once a ship that was owned by the Senegalese government, and despite the fact that it was designed to carry a maximum of 580 passengers, on September 26, 2002, this ship had at least 2,000 people on board. Again, when it could only have 580. So we're starting to see where we're going wrong here. This is obviously a huge red flag, and it's coupled with the fact that there was a large amount of people who were sleeping on the ship's deck, which is of course above the center of buoyancy. These combined only made matters worse, and the inevitable happened. The ship was en route to the Senegalese capital of Dakar, and it sailed further out to sea than it was licensed to sail. It ended up encountering a storm at that point, and then terribly rough waters. The ship ended up capsizing, and out of the 2,000 on board, only 64 people survived the entire ordeal. Not only was this because of the fact that the ship sank exceptionally quickly, but it's mostly because rescue was not sent until several hours after the entire thing took place. And finally, number 1. Ernest Shackleton. He braved the harsh conditions in the South Pole, and by 1914, Ernest Shackleton was ready to do it again. He set out with a group of 28 men, and they all had the intention to make it all the way across the continent and then arrive at a ship that should be waiting for them on the other side. Well, things took a bad turn almost immediately. See, as they were on their journey to Antarctica, they all became trapped in the ice as their ship, the Endurance, started falling apart. Now from here, as they were trapped, their supplies slowly began to dwindle, and this led to men getting aboard life rafts to then float for 14 days through the icy Antarctic seas to an island. Now unfortunately, once here, this wasn't the end, as the men then had to take another long journey all the way to the nearest inhabited island, which was South Georgia Island, which was 1,000 miles away. It was horrible. It was quite a journey. Now despite everything these men went through on this horrible, rough journey, all 28 of them survived this entire ordeal. And 107 years after its sinking, on March 9th, 2022, the Endurance, Ernest Shackleton's ship, was found in pristine condition. Yeah, it was found 10,000 feet below the icy Antarctic waters that it sank in, and the frigid temperatures mixed with the lack of sunlight, well, it's been sitting like Captain America. It's just sitting in time, just waiting. It looks like it's been untouched. It's actually really haunting to look at.
Starting off this countdown, we have the mysterious sunken ship. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration uses a remote operated vehicle called the Deep Discoverer in order to explore uncharted areas in the ocean and collect samples from them. Well, while diving in the Gulf of Mexico, they found an unknown shipwreck, which was then given the name number 15377. The Deep Discoverer was then able to take photos of the shipwreck and take samples from it. After doing so, they discovered that the shipwreck probably happened before the 1830s. It was a merchant ship built for distance, but that's all we know. The rest is history and a mystery. In our 9th spot today, we have the Atlit Yam ruins. This is a completely submerged ancient city that can be found 10 meters below sea level. It was first discovered in 1984 by a marine archaeologist, Juha Galili. Since then, a number of expeditions have took place in order to unearth the city and find out more about it. What's fascinating about this place is that right in the middle, it has this massive 10-acre stone circle thing. We still don't know much about this structure. One theory though is that it was used for some kind of ritual, but we still don't know. Not only that, scientists don't know how the city sunk. Theory goes that the city was struck by a tsunami which caused a volcanic eruption, causing the city to flood and sink. But like I said, we still don't know for sure. This is one seriously mysterious place. Coming in at number 8, we have the underwater river. Okay, this one blows my mind. Not only does it look super cool, but like the whole concept is super cool. So it doesn't seem possible, but there are rivers underwater. Like straight up, a flowing river beneath all the ocean water. There's even trees growing alongside the shores. How on earth is this possible? Like, how can there be two different batches of water underwater? It just blows my mind, and it's been a huge mystery to scientists for years. Moving on to number 7, we have the mysterious purple orb. Located deep under the sea near the Channel Islands, marine scientists discovered a glowing purple orb. This is something that they have never seen before. They were left completely baffled. Theories range from some kind of egg to fungi to a type of sea slug to even a type of jellyfish or a tiny octopus. They just have no clue. And whatever it is, it hasn't been identified yet. But it is beautiful beautiful, that's for sure. Whatever it is. Moving on, at number 6 we have the world's oldest city. Back in 2001, the remains of an ancient city were found at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of India. In fact, it was found by complete accident. The divers ended up finding pieces of sculptures, human remains, artwork, and wooden furniture. A piece of wood from the furniture dates back to at least 9,000 plus years ago. Now this was a huge breakthrough because it completely rewrites the history in that area. Now the city is huge. It's basically the size of Manhattan. They have massive walls and plazas, and like I said, the structure dates back to 9,000 years ago, which is 5,000 years older than any city discovered by archaeologists anywhere, and they barely know anything about it. That's why it's hella mysterious. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Lost Road or Highway. The Bimini Road is a rock formation in the Bahamas composed of rectangular shaped limestone blocks. It was first discovered back in 1968 by a diver. In fact, when he reported his findings, he said it just looked like pavement. So then some archaeologists took a dive to see what it was all about. They deemed it man-made as the stones were purposefully lined in a linear formation. The road goes on straight for about half a mile before ending in a slight curve. So now, what's the big deal? Well, obviously, there's something more to this road. Some believe that it actually leads to the lost city of Atlantis. One thing that supported this theory is that back in the late 1930s, prophet Edgar Cayce said that the discovery of a road will lead to Atlantis. He said that it will be discovered in 1968 or 1969. So when this road was discovered in 1968, people were flipping out, being like, this is it, it leads to Atlantis. But we still haven't found Atlantis, so nice. In our 4th spot today, we have the volcanic underwater activity. Volcanic activity underwater seems impossible, but alas, it is not. Let's take a look at Loki's castle in the Arctic Ocean. The volcanic activity found here was discovered in 2008 by researchers from the University of Bergen in Norway. They found a field of 5 active hydrothermal vents between Norway and Greenland. It's quite fascinating, and research is still going on to better understand all this. Like I said, the world is just one big mystery, and count how many times I said mystery or mysterious in this video and let me know in the comments below. I feel like it's a lot. Moving on, at number 3 we have the 60,000 ton stone structure. Located in the Sea of Galilee lies a weird cone-shaped stone structure that weighs 60,000 tons. It was first discovered in 2003 by a team of researchers doing a sonar survey of the sea. When they found it, they sent divers down there to check it out. That's when they found a very odd and massive structure. It's said to be nearly 10 meters high and 70 meters wide. Now there's a lot of theories about this structure. One is that it was made to mark a grave. 2, it was made on land but then it got submerged after sea levels rose. Or 3, it was created as a fish nursery. But over the years, archaeologists and scientists have gone into fights over the structure's origins. The only thing they know for sure is that it was man-made and dates back to 12,000 years ago. In our 2nd spot, we have the locomotive graveyard. In 1985, during ocean mapping, scientists came across something quite eerie. They discovered 2 steam locomotives from the 1850s. They are sunk under 90 feet of water, and honestly, they look hella creepy. Now, there were no train tracks or stations around, so scientists were baffled. How did the trains get there, and why? Well, one theory is that they were being transported from Boston to the mid-Atlantic when they got hit by a storm, and either they fell off by accident or they were deliberately pushed off to save the ship, lessen the load. Again, this is just a theory. No one actually knows how they sunk. Plus, there's not even a record of these at all. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Lost Kingdom of Cleopatra, aka Thonis Heracleion. Located just northwest of Alexandria is the sunken city of Heracleion, and it's referred to as Egypt's Atlantis. It laid lost under the sea until the early 2000s. A group of divers were working off of the Egyptian coast when they found a large fragment of rock under the seabed, or so they thought. It was just rock. When they brought it out of the water, they found it to be a sculpture of the Egyptian god of fertility, Happy. After this discovery, they madly went to work exploring the area. They ended up discovering pieces of pottery, ancient coins, jewelry, busts, and ruins of temples. How the city ended up underwater is still a mystery. One theory is that it has to do with the rising sea levels and crumbling foundations of the city, causing it to slide into the Mediterranean Sea.